A fortnight ago, Police Commissioner Mick Fuller came on this program and said that if the COVID numbers in Sydney didn't go down, if the lockdown wasn't working, he'd ask the Premier for greater police powers.
Premier has committed to me that if we need to strengthen the health orders again next Friday, then she will take that to Cabinet crisis.
With the numbers rising, he has now done just that, and the new restrictions mean that people can't travel more than 5 kilometres from their homes, and the fines for breaking quarantine have escalated to about $5,000. There is, however, a clear divergence in views between the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, and her Chief Health Officer. The Premier today said there's no hope of returning to 0 cases.
The experience of Delta is that no other jurisdiction has been able to eliminate it. It's not possible to eliminate it completely. We have to learn to live with it.
But Mark McGowan criticised her approach today. He gave an interview with Andrew Clennell on Sky News this morning, where he said that the Andrews government in Victoria should be the template and that it was able to get the cases back down to 0 from an even higher daily infection rate than Sydney is seeing now.
If you have a look at what Melbourne did last year, Dan Andrews, the Victorian government, Stephen Marshall in Adelaide, what he did recently, what we did a couple of months ago, we had the Delta strain come in from Bondi at the start of Sydney's outbreak. As soon as it arrived, we put those measures in place and the measures worked.
And New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller joins me again now. Commissioner, thank you for your time this evening.
Good evening, Sharon.
7 weeks into lockdown, the case numbers are higher than ever. If the Premier has given up returning to 0 cases, what is the point of this lockdown?
Yeah, thanks, Shari. I think there's a couple of things here in terms of strategy, and one is the vaccination strategy, and the Premier has talked and is delivering the vaccine program, which is 50, 60, 70, 80%. The Doherty report has been spoken about. But in between that, it's my goal as the Police Commissioner and as the Combat Agency for COVID in New South Wales is to get the COVID numbers down. And we can only do that by restricting the movement of people. And we have seen, I guess, over the last weeks, there have been people who have been breaching the health orders, and then they take that back to families, and we see family transmission. And the numbers of number of people who are COVID positive in the community have been in the 60s, which is unacceptable. And we've got that down today, and we need to continue to drive that down.
In terms of the overall strategy, though, you know, we understand the purpose of the lockdown if we're trying to reduce those COVID numbers to 0, which is what the Premier was articulating just a couple of weeks ago. But we've seen with Delta that just one case leads to hundreds daily and potentially thousands if there was no lockdown. So what is the aim of this lockdown now?
The lockdown is focusing on the unnecessary movement of people. In terms of people's employment and working, we've got permits coming up for people who need to leave into regional New South Wales. So the permits are about people who are moving around unnecessarily and spreading the virus. I think the balance between the economy and the health of the people of New South Wales has been a consistent issue, and it's a difficult issue to juggle. But the stronger powers, the bigger fines, is about trying to stop the unnecessary movement of people. New South Wales hasn't experienced the same problems the other states and territories have. I mean, Victoria is in their 7th lockdown, and this is truly only our 2nd lockdown. So from a New South Wales perspective, you know, I guess there's a sense of complacency in this. And I think you've got to look to the United Kingdom, where they've had 125,000 deaths related to COVID. And I think people need to just remember how dangerous this can be if the government gets it wrong. And the numbers of deaths at the moment in New South Wales, whilst it's not wonderful, we're still seeing low numbers of deaths.
Commissioner, you came on this show 2 weeks ago and you said that if the numbers weren't falling, you would ask the Premier for greater restrictions. I understand that you did that at a meeting on Tuesday where Brad Hazzard was present, David Elliott, the Police Minister, was present, and the Premier was present. At that meeting, I understand you did ask for the 5-kilometre restriction, but it wasn't enforced, and it was initially turned down at a Friday crisis of cabinet meeting. Is that correct?
Look, I wasn't at Cabinet Crisis Show, but can I say that before I came on your show 3 weeks ago, the Minister and I had a phone hookup with the Premier and Minister Hazzard. I wanted stronger powers in relation to masks, and I wanted the powers to close premises down that were continually breaching the health orders, and I got that. And then unfortunately with COVID, you need to wait 7 to 14 days to see the impact of any change, which I know is incredibly frustrating for the community. But the reality is what we saw over the time since we've spoken, Shari, is cases continue to rise. And there's only a couple of things you can do. One is ignore it, which is a terrible outcome for the economy in New South Wales and for people's health. Or I go back and I asked the Premier on Tuesday with the Police Minister, was give me 48 hours to come up with some options. And of course, 500 additional Australian Defence Force start to land on the ground from Monday. That was part of my strategy. A diversion of thousands of police from current duties into ensuring the COVID health orders are being applied. And I think the Premier last year, we listened to the Premier, and when the Premier asked us to do something, we did it, Shari, whether it's just complacency or whether people are just fatigued from COVID. But the reality is, if we don't get the numbers down, then we're never getting out of lockdown.
Yeah. Look, Commissioner, just to return to that point, we have seen from the very start of this outbreak that there has been division within the Berejiklian cabinet when it comes to, whether to even go into lockdown or how hard. I understand that after you and David Elliott asked for those greater powers on Tuesday, and I think Linda Somalis and Sam Maiden have reported some of this, that, this was then overruled at a crisis cabinet meeting on Friday afternoon. And it wasn't until radio host Ray Hadley did a public post where he said that it was a disgrace that you weren't given these powers, that the Premier, backflipped and changed her mind and decided that the police should be given the powers they were asking for.
Look, I wasn't at Cabinet Crisis. I asked the Premier for a number of things, and I got those. And there are plenty of people who are unhappy that I got the powers that I did, that the fines are what they are. But nevertheless, is that I got the message through sometime in the evening that I've got the powers I asked for. So I guess from my perspective, Shari, that the minutiae in that, democracy at work, luckily I guess I had the pleasure of missing all of that. I guess the challenge for me now is that I got what I asked for. I needed to deliver on reducing the virus, reducing the movement of people unnecessarily, and helping health get those numbers down. Now, if we can do that, and the vaccination rates, which are well on target, we're talking October, November, we can start to see normality, which I think for everyone in New South Wales, I mean, we're leading the country now in vaccination rates.
Commissioner, that's 2 to 3 months away, October to November. It's a long time to ask people to stay in lockdown.
And I want us out of lockdown, Shari. I've given this 21 days from tonight, midnight tonight, these orders come in. I've challenged my entire workforce that we need to bring New South Wales on the journey. There's 21 days to start to see the numbers drop and drop significantly. And look, it doesn't make me happy to step away from community-based policing, Shari. It doesn't make me happy at all. But I want us out of lockdown. And this is the great challenge, is that there is some pain that we need to go through the next 21 days to make sure everyone's coming on the journey, to get the numbers down. They dropped today by 50. We want to continue to see that to drop. The number of people in the community that were infectious today dropped. I need to continue to drive that through enforcement of the health orders. And I don't want to. I want people to listen. I want people to go, if I'm not sure, then what do I do in New South Wales? What do you do? Stay home. Shari, it's not that hard. You're allowed to leave for work if it's essential work. But other than that, stay at home. It's not, Shari, you make a good point. We're talking a couple of months now before the vaccination rates are at a level where we start to get our freedom. We're not talking 12 months away.
Commissioner, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And hopefully next time you come on the show in 2 or 3 weeks' time, we'll have better news.
I look forward to it.